Okay, we're going to set up Twitter authentication for our Supabase project. So the first thing we're going to need to do is go to developer.twitter.com and make sure you have an account at developer.twitter.com. Set that up, and then once you've done that, you'll want to click on the upper right to Developer Portal. So this takes us to developer.twitter.com portal dashboard. Okay, now we're going to create a project. This is for Twitter Auth. Our project's name is Azabab. Click Next. Select our use case. We're just going to build tools for business in this case. Tools for business. And then the app name, Azabab. Name isn't all that important. Okay, now what we have next is very important. We have an API key and an API secret. So the API key we're going to copy to the clipboard, and then I'm going to go over and save that because we're going to need it. Need it inside of our application. Okay, let's go back to our Twitter page again, and then the API secret key, we're going to copy that as well, and we're going to save that. So those are the two OAuth client ID and secret keys that we're going to need to authenticate with our project. But we're not quite ready to do that yet. We're going to need to go set up our app. So if we go all the way to the bottom and click on Enable Third-Party Authentication, and then under App Settings we're going to click on the gear icon right down here. This will take us to App Settings. Then we're going to go down to Authentication Settings. We're going to click Edit. We're going to request email address from users. First we need to enable three-legged authentication, and then we're going to request the email address. Now if you don't request the email address from users, you can still authenticate, but you won't be given an email address, so you really won't have anything to put in your database to set up your user. So we'll turn that on. And then the very important piece here is the callback URL. Now to get the callback URL, we need to go to our Supabase Supabase project, and I've already created the project here. And once you've selected your project, in this case the project is Azabab, you're going to go down to Settings and then go to API, and you're going to copy this API URL. This is your project ID, and this is the location of your API. So we'll just go ahead and copy that to the clipboard. Go back to Twitter, and we're going to paste that in. Now that's not the full callback URL, that's just your unique part of the callback URL. Then you're going to add /auth, /v1/callback. And that is your callback URL. That'll work for all the different authentication providers. Now we can put a website URL, I guess that's required. Azabab.com will be our application. Everything else here is optional except for the terms of service. TOS.html, and then we'll put in a privacy policy, HTTPS azabab.com privacy.html, and we'll need to make sure that those are created before we go live with our application. We'll click Save. Okay, and now we're ready to put our Twitter API key and secret into our Supabase project. So let's jump back to our Supabase project. We're going to go down to Authentication and Settings. And this is really important. The site URL needs to have the actual URL where it's going, where your application is going to be hosted. We can leave this at localhost, but if you're going to host this on azabab.com, you're going to need to put in https://azabab.com. Okay, so now we need to go down to Twitter. We're we're going to enable Twitter. And now here are the client ID and secret that we had before. So I'm going to go back to Visual Studio and copy the secret, or the client ID, and then I'm going to copy the secret. Let's see. And go back here, paste this in, scroll down, and click, actually scroll up, click Save. And now our backend is ready to take the credentials from Twitter to take Twitter authentication. The last step is to add the code to your client application. Okay, let's add our login code to our client application. In order to do that, we're going to need to set up our keys in our application, and luckily Supabase does that all for you. So all you need to do is go down to API and then jump down to Authentication, and they've filled out your Supabase key and your Supabase URL. This is a public key that you can publish in your application. It's okay if people see that. It's a public key. So I'm going to copy this to the clipboard, and I'm going to jump into our application, and you just need to import create client from the Supabase JS lib. Once you do that, you can paste in your Supabase key, come back over to the Supabase URL and the instantiation code, paste that in. Again, I haven't typed anything. All I'm doing is copying right from the Supabase site, and now I can create functions for logging in and logging out. So I'm going to go function login with Twitter. And again, you can make a generic function to do all your third-party logins or do them individually, however you like. I'm also going to do a function to log out of the application, and this is generic. It doesn't matter how people log in. And then you're going to attach these functions to a button you create somewhere. That's up to you. I'm using Angular, but you can use React or Vue or any of the great frameworks. Okay, so to get that, let's go back over and jump to the documentation for Supabase, and you're going to look for Auth sign-in. Once you get to Auth sign-in, you're going to go to sign-in using third-party providers. And again, this works for all the third-party providers. All you need to do is change the name of the provider. So I'm going to say copy. I'm going to paste this into my login with Twitter and change this to Twitter. Generally, when I do this, I'll just make a login with third-party pass a variable, and that variable will be Twitter, GitHub, Google, GitLab, Bitbucket, or any of our eight third-party provider options. And then from our logout function, we go to auth signout, and again, this is literally one line of code, but I still don't want to type it. I just want to paste it. And so now I can attach the logout code to my logout button, and we can log in with Twitter, and we can log out of the application. Actually, let's make this Twitter with lowercase w. Okay, that's it. It's perfect.